They promised you the JFK files. They promised you the Epstein files. They promised you mass deportations at scale, and they promised you no more wars. And they even promised, to a lesser extent, fiscal restraint. Well, here's where the MAGA movement actually is on May 15th of 2026. The JFK files came out half redacted, with most of the important sections still classified. The Epstein files only saw daylight because one Republican congressman in Kentucky forced the vote and refused to let it die when his own leadership tried to bury it. Mass deportations have not happened at the scale that we were promised, and we've been bombing Iran for nearly 3 months in a war that has not been declared and was unprovoked. Let's talk about the federal debt. The deficit is 16 months into this administration is up $2.7 trillion. It's now approaching $40 trillion. That's not my number. That's what Thomas Massie said, and he would know. He's the congressman who invented and wears that continual growing debt clock on his lapel as a pin. The MAGA movement, your movement, is scattering. The America First coalition that elected this administration is fragmenting in real time. Some of you have checked out, and I don't blame you. And some of you are angry, and some of you are still pretending that promises got kept. You got to pull your head out of the sand. And on Tuesday, May 19th, 4 days from today, the Republican voters of Kentucky's 4th Congressional District are going to decide whether one congressman who told you to expect all of this and who voted that way for 14 straight years gets to keep his seat. His name is Thomas Massie, and he is the last fragment of the original promise still standing in the United States Congress. And there are 3 billionaires from out of state, in fact, I would say from out of the country, or at least with interests that are aligned with American interests, are spending whatever it takes to take him out. I'm Dan McKnight, and this is the Bring Our Troops Home podcast. Let me tell you what's actually happening in Kentucky.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Welcome back to the Bring Our Troops Home podcast. We are less than a week away from the Republican primary in Kentucky, and I want to talk to you about Thomas Massie. I want to tell you about who he is. Massie is an MIT-trained engineer. He has multiple patents that he owns. He's built tech companies. He sold it. He came home to farm in Lewis County, Kentucky. He was the judge executive before he ran for Congress. He's a 7-term congressman from Kentucky's 4th District, and he's been in office since 2012. But none of that's really important with what we want to talk about today. I want to talk about his voting record because that's what's truly important and what matters. Thomas Massie opposed the war in Syria. He opposed the war in Afghanistan. He opposed the war in Yemen. He opposed the war in Ukraine. He opposed military action in Venezuela, and he opposes this war in Iran alongside Bring Our Troops Home and every other constitutional non-interventionist in this country. He votes against foreign aid, period. Not for foreign aid for Israel, all foreign aid. Not just to any country, all countries. His position is that the federal government has no business sending American tax dollars overseas while we're adding trillions to the national debt at home. That is the constitutional position. That is the America First position. And it used to be the position of the party that elected this current president. Massie is the man who forced the release of the Epstein files. He co-sponsored the Epstein File Transparency Act with Ro Khanna of California. He walked it through a discharge petition over the objection of his own leadership. And then he delivered a 427-1 House vote victory. The reason many of you have read a single page of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, the reason the Justice Department released 3 million pages of documents, the reason why the people named in the file are being prosecuted in other countries now is because of Thomas Massie. And in 2023, 2 years before this primary, Thomas Massie publicly endorsed our signature legislation, the Defend the Guard Act. He doesn't just oppose endless wars on principle. He understands the constitutional architecture that is supposed to stop them. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. That is the man that this president and the donor class that owns half of the United States Senate is trying to remove from Congress in just 4 days. And I want to talk about how, because this is where the story actually gets interesting. The president has called Thomas Massie disloyal to the Republican Party, disloyal to the people of Kentucky, and, in his own words, disloyal to the United States of America. He's called him a disaster for the party, a terrible person, the worst. He said there's something wrong with him, a total ineffective loser. That is the standard rhetorical arsenal of Donald Trump. But there is one attack that, even by the standards of this administration and the commander-in-chief, that went too far. Last November, the president of the United States, a man who has been married 3 times himself, who does not have a track record of being faithful, who does not have a track record of any sort of moral compass when it comes to marriage, went on Truth Social to attack Thomas Massie's new marriage. What you need to know, though, that Thomas Massie's first wife, Rhonda, his high school sweetheart, the love of his life, the mother of his 4 children, his wife of 31 years, she had passed away in June of 2024, suddenly, unexpectedly. And he buried her in Kentucky. 16 months later, over a year later, in October of 2025, Massie remarried a woman named Carolyn Grace Moffa, and he announced it publicly. He didn't hide it from anybody. He said he still misses Rhonda every day. He thanked his children for being supportive. And here's what the president of the United States posted in response, and I'm quoting him directly. Did Thomas Massie, sometimes referred to as Rand Paul Jr., because of the fact that he always votes against the Republican Party, get married already? Boy, that was quick. Anyway, have a great life, Thomas. And, parentheses, question mark, close parentheses, his wife will soon find out that she's stuck with a loser. Read that again with me. The president of the United States referred to a grieving widower's new wife as a question mark in parentheses because he couldn't be bothered to actually know her name. And then he told her that she was stuck with a loser. His own former lawyer, Jenna Ellis, who knew Rhonda Massie personally and prayed for the family, went on social media and said, quote, "Some things are still sacred and should still be beyond this kind of political mudslinging." I couldn't agree more. Even his own people knew it was too much. Now, let's look at the pattern. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned her seat in January after this president publicly turned on her over the Epstein files. He called her, and this is the nickname on Truth Social in writing, Marjorie Traitor Greene. She started receiving death threats because of it. Direct threats against her son. She forwarded them to the president, and according to her speech at the Ron Paul Institute 2 weeks ago in Texas, the president's response was that if her son got killed, she deserved it because she was a traitor to him. She says she saved the texts. She says she would go to jail if she released them, and she's probably right. Joe Kent, 11 combat deployments, Army Rangers, Special Forces, CIA paramilitary, widower, father. The man this president himself appointed to run the National Counterterrorism Center resigned in March because he refused to sign off on the imminent threat justification for the war in Iran. The administration's response, no, Donald Trump's response was that Joe Kent was weak on national security. Press called him anti-Semitic. We covered this in an entire episode a few weeks ago. Now, Thomas Massie, loser, terrible person, disloyal to America, a wife who's stuck with him. We're starting to see a pattern. Now, Thomas Massie is not a veteran of the armed services, and neither is Marjorie Taylor Greene. They didn't deploy to Afghanistan. They didn't deploy to Iraq. They didn't bury anybody in the desert. But Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they are veterans of the MAGA movement. Even more importantly, they're veterans and leaders of the America First movement. They were in this from before the administration won this last election. They voted for the platform. They rallied the troops. They campaigned on it. They believed in it. And the moment they kept their promises while the administration was breaking its own, they got called traitors and losers and weak and disloyal. Now, Joe Kent is both a veteran of the MAGA and America First movement and a veteran of the armed services, combat veteran. The same thing happened to him. But Joe Kent was never personally bombastic or insulting towards the president at all. He just questioned the intelligence that took us into another undeclared war and resigned because his principles and his foundation did not align with the actions of the administration. but attacking him. That's the playbook. Tell the truth and you're going to get smeared. So let's talk about who's paying for the smear campaign in Kentucky. Let's follow the money. Ed Galrain is a retired Navy SEAL captain from Shelby County, Kentucky. He's a fifth-generation farmer, 30 years in the military. It's all impressive. By all accounts, he's a decorated combat veteran. I'm not here to attack his service. His service is not the issue. His backers, they're the issue. Galrain ran for the state senate in Kentucky in 2024, and he lost in the Republican primary. Then, in October of 2025, he somehow worked his way in and met with this administration, met with the president personally. And while he was at the White House, President Trump recruited him to run against Thomas Massie. Now, Ed Galrain is refusing to ever debate Thomas Massie. Multiple times he's refused. He's run a campaign almost entirely through television advertising. He stayed in the basement from almost all public events. Does that sound like somebody that Trump used to criticize? I think it does. TV advertising and campaigning on TV, as we learned from Kamala Harris and from Joe Biden, is incredibly expensive. All of that TV advertising costs money. And Ed Galrain, who has the personality of a wet napkin, would never be able to raise that money from Kentucky voters, small dollar donors, grassroots. The Galrain money is not coming from Kentucky, in fact. It's coming from 3 billionaires. None of them live in Kentucky. They've probably never been to Kentucky. None of them have homes in Kentucky's 4th district, and none of them are constituents in that race. Miriam Adelson, she's a casino magnate, widow of Sheldon Adelson. She lives in Las Vegas. Paul Singer, a hedge fund manager at Elliott Management, is in New York. And John Paulson, a hedge fund manager in New York, also. And per Thomas Massie himself, when he was on the Tucker Carlson show a week ago, John Paulson appears in Jeffrey Epstein's contact book hundreds of times. Hear that again. One of the 3 billionaires funding the campaign to remove the man who forced the release of the Epstein files is himself named in the Epstein records hundreds of times. These 3 people have funded a super PAC called Kentucky MAGA, a super PAC named after the state that none of them live in, and a movement that none of them actually believe in or represent. It's designed to look local. It's run by one of the biggest villains in politics, a man named LaCivita. He was a senior advisor on the president's 2024 campaign. I got to meet him at the RNC convention in 2024, and I'll tell you, I've never been less impressed by a political operative. LaCivita is a thug. He's involved in races all around the country where he has no direct impact other than to funnel money into a national central place. He is managing the Idaho Republican governor's campaign in Idaho, and he's never set foot in the state. That super PAC in Kentucky has spent $5.6 million attacking Massie. AIPAC, their super PAC, the United Democracy Project, has spent another $2.6 million. The Republican Jewish Coalition has spent another $4 million. Christians United for Israel is in the mix as well. And here's the move that should make your skin crawl if it's not already. I know mine is. According to Massie's interview with Tucker Carlson on May 6th, the Israel lobby is now funneling its hard dollars to Galrain's campaign through a vendor called Democracy Engine, which is normally associated with the Democratic Party's fundraising platform, Act Blue. You heard me right. If you know anything about Act Blue, you know that they've been in some trouble because of the way that they funnel money illegally to Democratic causes, and they falsify donor records, and that's been well documented. You can search it on YouTube or Google, and you'll find all of the records. That's how they hide their money and their involvement. So when Kentucky voters look at the FEC filing, they don't immediately see the names of the donors writing the checks. Don't take my word for any of it. Here is Thomas Massie on Tucker Carlson on May 6th, 2026, in his own words. Check it out.
And it's going to be close. It's just going to be, the result is going to be based on who turns out.
So it was 81% margin, 76, 75, like full on blowouts in the Republican primary in your district in Kentucky. And now it's within a couple of points and you could lose.
Correct.
And the difference is they have spent $10 million against you. So I don't think anyone would dispute that. That's the difference. The money poured into this race from outside of Kentucky is basically pushing you to the point of almost losing, and you may lose. Where'd that money come from?
Well, it didn't come from regular people. It's come from billionaires, and 95% of it, at least 95%, has come from the Israeli lobby. So I'll give you their proxies. The RJC, which is the Republican Jewish Coalition, AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson went together. They funded a PAC called MAGA Kentucky, which is neither MAGA nor Kentucky, but
95%. A foreign lobby, and I'm using the words Thomas Massie used on national television, is paying for the campaign to remove the only Republican congressman who was consistently voting against foreign wars and against foreign aid. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a quoted fact given by a sitting United States congressman on the most watched political podcast in the country, citing the names of the donors writing the checks. And it tells you everything that you need to know about why the man at the top of the party is going after Thomas Massie personally. Massie is bad for the donors. The donors are good for the party, and the party falls in line. Those donors that happen to have foreign interests at the top of their concern list are okay with the chaos that America is creating in the Middle East. Thomas Massie is not. Now, before we get into actually funding Thomas Massie, let's pause and meet the man personally orchestrating the operation to take him out, because every great drama needs a villain, and Bring Our Troops Home has a long-running segment exactly for this purpose. Welcome back to this week's Neocon Idol. Now, the last time we ran this, we featured Lindsey Graham, but tonight's contestant is a Marine combat veteran from Virginia. Now, you know I don't generally attack former military veterans, especially my fellow Marines. This man actually received a Purple Heart in the Gulf War in 1991. Real service, real wounds, real sacrifice. And then he came home and got into politics, and what he did next earned him a permanent slot on this Neocon Idol stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Christopher Joseph LaCivita. In 2004, 22 years ago, LaCivita was the chief strategist for the Swift Boats for Veterans for Truth, the dark money operation that took down John Kerry's presidential campaign by attacking Kerry's military service in Vietnam. You heard me right. Using veterans to attack a veteran's service. Not something I'm willing to do. Chris LaCivita, not so much. The campaign was so dishonest that Mother Jones magazine called it a smear. NPR called it discredited, and the English language gained a new verb. To swift boat somebody now means to launch an unfair, untrue political attack. Chris LaCivita, he coined the term by doing it. A combat veteran with a Purple Heart, building his career attacking another combat veteran service record on behalf of donors who never served. That's the LaCivita business model. Take rich people's money, smear veterans they don't like, and walk away with a check. In 2024, he co-managed this administration's presidential campaign. And per a Daily Beast investigation, he personally pulled millions of dollars out of that operation and put it in his own pocket. He makes money, win or lose. That's the system that Chris LaCivita, the thug, promotes. And here we are in 2026. He's running the MAGA Kentucky PAC. It's a super PAC funded by Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson, designed to remove Thomas Massie from Congress. The operation has produced an AI deepfake video of Massie holding hands with members of the squad like AOC, insinuating that he was going into a hotel to have illicit sex with her. It has spent $5.6 million on attack ads. Chris LaCivita is the man writing and cashing the checks. Marine Corps combat veteran, a Purple Heart recipient, a man who attacked John Kerry's service in Vietnam, now hired by 3 out-of-state billionaires to attack Thomas Massie at the direction of President Trump. And he's a man, Thomas Massie, who has voted against every endless war for 14 years. LaCivita and Trump are fighting him on behalf of a foreign lobby that wants more and more of those chaotic wars of choice. Chris LaCivita. A man who knows exactly what it's like to come home from war with a Purple Heart. A man who has spent his entire career making sure that the next generation of Americans get sent into war to earn one. Unlike American Idol, in this game, there are no winners. And Chris LaCivita, you are the Neocon Idol. Now, what about Thomas Massie's money? Let's go back to that. I want to show you where it's actually coming from. This is the Massie Moneybomb that's been going on for a couple of weeks. This is a live counter from MassieMoneybomb.com. I encourage you to visit it and chip in where you can. This is the official grassroots fundraising site for Thomas Massie's campaign, modeled directly after the Ron Paul money bombs of 2008 and 2012. Same concept, same energy, same kind of people behind it. $2,334,884 at current count. These have been raised for Thomas Massie. The goal was $2,400,000, although the original goal, I believe, was $200,000. And you can see that we've blown right past it. They're within $65,000 of hitting their newest goal, and they're going to keep raising that goal until they've got enough money to finish this campaign. In 4 more days, it should be over. These are not billionaires that are contributing to the Massie Money Bomb. These are hundreds of thousands of small dollar donors. By the campaign's own numbers from the first money bomb back in March, more than 3,200 individual donors in the first 24 hours alone. The vast majority of them giving small amounts that they could and do give multiple times. The people who saw the smear campaign, people who did the math and decided to fight back with their own credit cards, that's who is contributing to the Massie Money Bomb. And for most of these donors, this was their first political donation ever. They are not political operatives. They are not lobbyists. They are not the billionaire class. They are the fragments of the America First movement that the donor class and the administration has been trying to absorb somehow. But when they can't, they try to destroy them for decades. Well, these people, this fragment, this remnant, this America First displaced voting bloc, they've finally found a place to put their money, and that place is MassieMoneybomb.com. I've contributed to it. My wife has contributed to it, and I encourage every one of you to do the same. $2.3 million in a single money bomb without $1 from AIPAC or any other foreign lobby, without $1 from a New York hedge fund or a Las Vegas casino owner. That is what the America First campaign looks like still to this day, when it's actually still America First. Now, let's talk about the polls, because polls are important. They're not everything, but they are important. You may have seen a poll released just a day before yesterday by a firm called Quantus Insights, showing that Galrin, Thomas Massie's opponent, is ahead of Massie 48-43. Earlier this week, that same pollster had Massie up by 9. So in about a month, this firm has swung the numbers 17 points. That's what all those billionaires donors will get you with all the TV ads. But there's a few things that are worth noting, and you got to look into this. Quantus is rated B/C, meaning that they are a below acceptable standard for pollsters. That comes from Nate Silver, who is one of the best pollsters in America. That is a polling industry grade that means roughly average accuracy, not top tier, not reliable. And by the way, it was a text message survey sent to cell phones, which is one of the cheapest and least reliable polling methods. And it's one of the most volatile. No real true pollster with any credibility would rely on a text poll with any specificity. My question about the poll is, where do they get the numbers from? Because my guess is it comes from the RNC's own registered voter list, meaning that that pool is ripe with the sycophants who still follow the President of the United States. Now, I'm not saying the poll is wrong. I'm not going to say that. But I am saying that the poll is one data point, and the firm that bounced this race 17 points in 5 weeks, when they tell you something, you might have to question the firm just a little bit. It also tells you something about this moment right now. I'm going to tell you about a more detailed, more professional, more accurate poll from April and what it actually shows. These are the crosstabs that cable news, they don't put on screen. But if you dig into any of the real polls, if you know anything about polling at all, you know that the truth is in the crosstabs. You don't find when the crosstabs fit the narrative of the donor class, you'll never hear them. The big data poll, it was conducted April 3rd through April 7th in 2026. And I want to read you the numbers by age group, because this is where the truth lies. Voters 18 to 29 years old, Massie 78.5%, Gowring 21.5%. Voters 30 to 44 years old, Massie 64.9%, Gowring 35.1%. Voters 45 to 64 years old, Massie 53.3%, Gowring 46.7%. Thomas Massie wins every age group under 65, and he wins the 18 to 29 cohort by almost 60 points. That was the group that came out heavy for Donald Trump when they had no reason to vote at all. They're not historically reliable voters. They're the ones that have been most disenfranchised, that are most anti-war, that were most interested in seeing the Epstein files released. The ones that are most affected by illegal immigration because they can't afford housing. They can't find reliable jobs that pay a living wage. They're the future of the political movement. And they vote for Massie by 60 points. Then the voters over 65, Gowring has 65% and Massie has 35%. Why the drastic swing once somebody reaches 65? The BoomerCon, Fox News, CNN News generation that gets their media, that gets their information spoon-fed to them from Sean Hannity and from Mark Levin. No wonder they support Ed Gowring. They're the same people that those media outlets listen to, the same 3 billionaires that influenced Donald Trump, the same 3 that Chris LaCivita takes the money and puts in his own pocket. The America First movement, the young men and women who showed up for the anti-war, anti-establishment president, the people who actually constitute the future of the Republican Party, back Thomas Massie overwhelmingly. The only demographic propping up Ed Gowring is the cable news viewer who's been watching Sean Hannity since 1998 and thinks the donor class has his back. The Israel First candidate from Kentucky's 4th District is being kept afloat by the Fox News BoomerCon vote. That is his coalition. And if the under 65 voters in Kentucky's 4th show up on Tuesday, Thomas Massie wins, and he wins in a mass landslide. Now, many of you may be asking, why does this race matter to bring our troops home? We are typically apolitical, and we still are, but we run the Defend the Guard legislation all around the country. And the Defend the Guard movement specifically is interested in Thomas Massie winning because he's been with us from the beginning. He has endorsed our bill. Back in 2023, 2 years before this primary, Thomas Massie publicly endorsed Defend the Guard. He has met with me personally. He's met with members of my leadership team. He's met with bill sponsors of Defend the Guard from different states. The bill that we've been pushing in state capitals from Idaho to Tennessee to Oklahoma to Wyoming to Kentucky for years. The bill that says that no governor can deploy his state National Guard into active combat under federal control unless Congress declares war. Thomas Massie didn't just endorse it. He understood the pressure campaign the Pentagon was running against our state sponsors. Listen to what he said in 2023, and I'm going to quote him directly. I have heard of it, and I love it. I've heard from some states. I've actually had a state senator call me. One of the problems they have is they get this bill to the floor, and some general comes in and testifies and lobbies. He's wearing his uniform, and he intimidates the legislators. And then they say, oh, your guard won't get as much money if your state passes that. We will shut down this military contractor here, and they go around, and not everybody falls for it, but a lot of them do. But I love this legislation. Read that with me. I love this legislation. But Massie talks about things that we've been talking about for a long time. A general in uniform walking into a state Senate hearing in Boise or Helena or Cheyenne and threatens state legislators with funding cuts and contractor closures if they pass a constitutional restraint on the deployment of their own National Guard. That is the United States military in uniform, openly attempting to coerce a state legislature. That is the executive branch interfering with the legislative branch. The executive branch interfering with the people's branch, where we have our representatives. Thomas Massie saw it. Thomas Massie called it out. Thomas Massie volunteered to write letters, to hold hearings, to back our state legislators against it. That is what an ally in Congress looks like. That is what we lose if Thomas Massie loses on Tuesday. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do between now and Tuesday. The MAGA movement was promised an end to these endless wars. The most consistent anti-war vote in the United States House of Representatives is Thomas Massie. The MAGA movement was promised the Epstein files. The man who forced their release is Thomas Massie. The MAGA movement was promised fiscal restraint. The one Republican who said no to all of the spending bills, to the supplementals, to the foreign aid packages, to the big, beautiful bill for 14 straight years is Thomas Massie. The man who says he will not let our republic die by unanimous consent and forces a vote on every spending bill is Thomas Massie. The MAGA movement was promised America first. Thomas Massie is the last America first congressman the donor class has not been able to break and corrupt. 4 days, then they either keep him in Congress or they don't. So I have 3 actions for you. 1, if you live in Kentucky's 4th Congressional District, vote on Tuesday, May 19th. Don't miss it. Don't let work, don't let a weather storm, don't let anything keep you from the polls. Get to the polls and vote. This is the highest leverage thing that a person watching this video can do. If you live in Boone County, Kenton County, Campbell County, or any of the surrounding counties, show up. Bring your spouse, bring your kid who just turned 18, bring a neighbor, bring your family, bring dead people from the cemetery. That's a joke for those Democrats in the crowd. The polls under 65 say that you have this race. Show up. The donor class is hoping that you stay home. Number 2, if you live anywhere else in America, go to MassieMoneybomb.com and contribute. Kick in whatever you can. I've given as much as I can without hurting, and I will continue to give until this election is over. They're within $65,000 of hitting their goal, and if they hit it, they'll raise the goal again because they need every penny they can to buy radio and TV and print. Give $20, $50, whatever you can give. This is how a grassroots campaign answers $14 million in attack ads by 3 billionaire donors. One small donor at a time. That website again is MassieMoneybomb.com. And number 3, share this episode. Send it to a veteran, send it to a friend, send it to a young Republican who's losing faith. Send it to somebody from the MAGA coalition, the America First movement, who is disenfranchised. Send it to anybody who voted for an anti-war America First president and is wondering where in the hell that movement went. Tell them it's in Kentucky's 4th district and it has 4 days and it resides right here at Bring Our Troops Home. Thomas Massie is the last fragment of the original promise still standing in the United States Congress. Don't let them take him out. For the Constitution, for our troops, for the Republic. Thanks for watching the Bring Our Troops Home podcast, and I hope you show up on Tuesday.